Assalamualaikum, brothers and sisters. It's David Hodge. Welcome. All right, brothers and sisters. We're headed to the time that we're going to change everyone's lives as you know it forever. Your day-to-day life is about to be affected tremendously. It's unimaginable. It's unprecedented. We're rushing towards the time of unprecedented trouble, which is a time like no other, and never will there be. And all this is being caused by you, brothers and sisters, because you are God's chosen people, and it's time for you to rise. But everyone is against you. They don't want to see you rise up, brothers and sisters, because that comes with their decline, the end of their reality, and the beginning of yours. So no one was cheering us on. No one wanted to see us endure this process to the finish line. But we are, brothers and sisters. And what's taking place in the Middle East, this is the process that's taking place. There's being a way being prepared for you, brothers and sisters, because God did not forget about you. Everyone wants to count you out, but God has you in His favor. All right, brothers and sisters. The war in the Middle East. Now, we explained there will not be any peace agreements. It talks of this thing collapsing. It's weak. It's fragile. The ceasefire is hanging by a thread. It's active, but the tensions between Iran and America and Israel, that tension is rising fast. Even their leaders are speaking out, saying that this thing could collapse at any moment. No one agrees with the decisions that Iran is taking. They're expanding control around the Strait of Hormuz, which they don't like. But Iran is not backing down. They're not in favor of making people happy. They're intentionally pissing people off, trying to make things, how you say it? They're not trying to come to an agreement. They're not trying to put ice on the situation. They're hoping that this sparks conflict, you see? Because they're not in favor of cutting this thing out, you see? They're not giving up the Strait of Hormuz, which this is the world's most important oil shipping routes. That's where they come through. So the world is concerned about the restrictions in energy supply, distribution, and oil, because everybody needs the economy to thrive with that oil. And meanwhile, oil prices and the economy, the pressure is increasing, rising, brothers and sisters. The oil prices are up, and the hopes for peace is low. It's weak. Like I said, it's fragile. But you know, America would break the bank to keep this war going. You see, than to have the pressure over here. You see, so you have it in your house or you have it on the outside. Either way you go, you got to make a decision. Where would you like your consequence? Either way you go, they're both going to affect America. They're just stalling. But they'll break the bank to make sure you don't find out who you are, to keep this lie going about false Israel being the true seed of Abraham and supporting them and so-called blessing them, which is truly cursing us. So it's now being reported that they've spent over $29 billion this conflict has caused. So inflation and gas prices are rising. The concern is that they increase worldwide. Like I said, we've already seen how high they got. They went back down, and they're projected to increase again, brothers and sisters. And everybody like, well, this needs to stop. This needs to stop. Well, it's not going to stop because the military tensions continue with false Israel, false Satan. Mm-hmm. They're still striking and clashing, linked. They're still clashing with Lebanon, sending strikes over there. It's ongoing. And the U.S. naval forces remain deployed in the region, a heavy amount of their soldiers. In Iran, they're telling you, hey, cut it out. They're trying to warn against further military action. They're trying to play this game with you. And that's what it is, because it's got to be game over. So the whole peace thing, right? Like the ceasefire, right? They're waiting to make a negotiation that they can agree. See, Trump didn't agree. They don't want Iran to have the nuclear program. They don't want them to have sanctions relief. And they don't want them to have control of security around Hormuz. But that oil matters. People don't realize that that's where they have you. They make you believe that everything else in the world is what make it go around. It's that oil. Without that oil, man, you're toast. You can't run your economy without it. So Trump stated, "Oh, it's no big deal. This is this and that." Trying to explain that his allies would need oil. They need y'all are the ones who mainly need the oil. Ah, you know, he's just talking. You need that oil too. That's why you making statements, bold statements to other countries trying to pull their, trying to play your cards and see what you do. Try to bluff or, call people out. You know, it's a pride thing. You know, trying to tough and all these things. And this stuff don't work. That time's over with. Said all things will fail. Everything that America do is gonna fail. It don't matter what you do. You're racing the clock to your death. So, you know, they're hoping that they can get China, Pakistan, and such other individuals to accept this to help with the situation of this talk of peace. Hoping that they'll listen to them. You know, it's not gonna work. So, like I said, the pressure is increasing. The evidence of this, the region remains extremely unstable, even despite of the ceasefire. It's still, like I said, this thing's about to snap. The shipping, the oil market, the military activity, all under pressure. The escalation is right around the corner. Negotiation fails, bam, the war's back on. And the thing is, that's the thing. Everybody wants this thing to go away. There is no going away. And that's what we explain. That's what we're here for. To tell you the truth of the time, the unsealed scriptures, the revelations, which is our mind, brothers and sisters. We know how this thing is going to turn out. We know exactly what's going to happen before it happened. We're here to give you the information so you can be successful. You take it, and now you can make decisions based off the information you have, giving you better information. Because they want you to perish. How do we know that? Consider people who had a vision would. People who had a vision would perish. That's why they don't give it to you. So I'm talking about the Abraham covenant. They'll tell you where you're going. They'll tell you about your land. You see? They'll tell you that you will leave out of here. You know? So, excuse me, brothers and sisters. So, however, we know what's going to take place, brothers and sisters. We're in a time where America's involvement is about to end tragically. All those involved with them. We're in a time of Michael's and his angels, which is the God, Master Farah Muhammad, which is Michael, and his angels around in Syria, versus the dragon and his angels, the dragon being the house of Sa'ad. The dragon's angels is America, Britain, and false Israel. But we know the outcome. It said Michael's and his angels were victorious. So it's going to be a power switch in the Middle East. We're going to take over the Middle East, take authority and power. It's going to affect these individuals, America, Britain, America, Britain to be defeated, America, Britain kicked out, false Israel isolated, under siege, waiting for his destruction. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, know his destruction is near. Not redemption, not salvation. It says redemption. It says destruction. Excuse me. That's not supposed to happen. It's an abomination. They so-called God's people, right? It said when God placed them in the land, they're not to be uprooted or removed. That means they're not supposed to happen. I mean, they're not who they claim to be. You see? That's another situation. That's a problem. So if they wasn't true seed Abraham, who were they? It tell you exactly who they are. So they were Satan. It says, I'm giving out the synagogue of the Satan, or the ones saying themselves Jews to be, and not they are, but they are lying. The ones claiming to be Jews, that's them, right? They're lying. It says the blasphemy, which is a lie, are the ones saying what? Jews to be themselves, and not they are, but what? Synagogue of the Satan. Satan. So it's telling you exactly who they are. So and everybody's going to find out who they are. And we're going to find out who we are. And then now you're in trouble. See? They curse those who curse God's people. Now you know who you are. You're going to do it. That's where we are. That's what they're trying to escape. Judgment. You see? So when all this takes place, when all this stuff happens, they're going to attack all blacks. They're going to attack us, brothers and sisters, because they have no choice. Because the ideology of their reality, the ideology of their reality is about to be crushed. The world is structured around the idea that false Israel is the true seed of Abraham. So if that explodes, it's going to send shockwaves through the planet. Everybody's going to be walking around all discombobulated. That's what keep people centered. I'm about to realize that they all balanced now. Because they ain't that now. What they going to do? The whole reality is based off that. So that's crushed. And they're crushed. You see? So they can't allow that to happen. So they're gonna attack you before it happens. They can't let false Israel be destroyed. So they're gonna come and get you. That's why when you see Jerusalem, which the capital of Jerusalem is false Israel, right? But Jerusalem is the capital of false Israel. So it says when you see false Israel surrounding my armies, know that their destruction is near, right? And it say flee. Telling you to go. Telling you to hit the hill. Flee. He said, now. He said, don't go back to get your baby. Imagine that. You can't even go back to get your child. He said, you'll die. So you hope that your children's with you. But if you can't, if your child's not, it says you must leave the child behind. It says, go. Don't go back. You'll die. If you hesitate, you'll die. That's the type of time we're on, brothers and sisters. The seriousness. They're going to attack all blacks. You see? Due to that little situation, right? See, English is terrible. It's a big situation. Due to this situation, which is huge. He said he'll attack all blacks. Brothers and sisters, all blacks. So you remember when they used to do this, right? Remember they used to deal with us shrewdly. That's what they used to do. I mean, you see that? That's the English word. That's the English. You see? I'm still working on that, brothers and sisters. That's what they do. That's what they're doing. Come on, come. Let us deal shrewdly in a way that they don't see coming with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. So yes, shrewdly, in a way that we don't see coming. That's how they've been dealing with us, brothers and sisters. Max incarceration, 3-strike law, abortions, falsely diagnosed in us, sterilization, vaccination, immunizations, putting stuff in our food, poisoning us, taking stuff out of there that's good for you, to make sure your body function properly, taking minerals out, make you deficient, messing up your quality of life, putting liquor stores and drugs in your community, making you criminal by survival, taking stuff out of your neighborhoods, which you need to uh, you need to sustain yourself, right? You need certain things to sustain your life and to take care of yourself. And they're taking it out, making you short, which is causing you to be criminal by survival now. So now you got to go do stuff that out of the ordinary become criminal to survive. They did that intentionally so they can build a system which they use your misery, right? This system is set up to thrive off your misery. So these are things that they do. Kill you in the streets. Got the police out there shooting and killing you, all because of what they're setting up. They set these things up for you, dealing with you in a way you don't see coming. Putting television, TV, entertainment, celebrities, all this stuff that poison your mind, influence you. How you going? Have you acting other than yourself? So that was just the point I was making. That they dealing with us truly, right? The way we don't see coming. But here in a minute, they're about to be dealing with you, obviously. They're about to be dealing with you in plain sight. They're dealing with you in a way that you do see coming. Because they don't give a damn. Because now they're at a pinnacle point where you're an existential threat to their lives. And they're going to choose their life over yours immediately. And it's going to be all attack all blacks, no matter who you are. Demon or not, original or not. They're not going to sit around and try to differentiate who's original, who's not, you good, we good. No. Y'all messed up. Y'all black. Y'all, yeah, get them all. You see? That's where we headed, brothers and sisters. They say flee. Get out. Go, 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 go. That's what we tell our brothers. You can't stay here in America. You can't stay here. You don't want no parts of what's taking place. That's about to take place in America. It's going to be bad. Right? That was the point I was making about oil. You need oil. That's what makes your economy thrive. And America's about to go out. Once that authority happened, once that switch of power in the Middle East where Iran and them are victorious, America has they kicked out. They have no more access to oil. And the rest of the stuff they do got, they send into Britain because Britain got to go to war with China. Man, all the resources, the oil, everything's gone. And things about to start getting bad in America. There's going to be a total economic collapse. You know what that means? No food, no water, no gas, no oil, no electronics, no electricity, no this, no that. Total economic collapse. Severe social unrest. People freezing to death in the dead of winter. No energy, no oil. Can't get none. It's going to be real, real bad, brothers and sisters. I'm telling you. That's why I said don't invest in America. Don't invest in here. Invest on your way out. You got a second option. You get the hell out of here. Invest in yourself. Don't invest in America because America's going to be burnt up. Never be a nation again. Engulfed in flames. Nuked. So you invest in America. You invest, whatever you invest in America is going to be burnt up, including yourself. So imagine, like everything I'm saying, right? I'm trying to bring it to a point. People are about to panic because the reality of what's happening over there in the Middle East, and everything that I named about total economic collapse, right? What's happening over there is about to come over here, but much worse, way worse. Something you can't even imagine. Worse than any severe recession, Great Depression, world wars, any bombings, any massacres, any um, anything you can think of, Holocaust, Any sick, twisted things you can think of it's gonna be much worse than that, brothers and sisters. It's coming here. It said men's hearts have failed them from fear. From fear. Men have heart attacks from fear. The expectation to mean something hadn't happened. It's just the expectation of it. Meaning that they're just looking at it. The anticipation. Meaning it hasn't happened yet, but they're just looking at what's to come. It said, are those things which are coming on the earth, coming into America, for the powers of the heavens, which for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Middle East, the war, power switch, authority power switch. Michael's angels is victorious versus Dragon's angels. Bam. You see? This is going to change people's lives forever. They know what's happening over there. It's coming here. It's giving them heart attacks. People driving down the street, crashing. People in planes coming out of the sky. You see people operating heavy machinery, running into stuff. People fainting. People eating and doing what they do. They get the news and they croak out right there. This time's going to be intense. No food. People used to eating constantly, all around the clock. Whenever they want, they get up, they eat, they drink, they eat. They do that about 6 to 8 times or more a day. They do what they want when they want. You see? So this is unprecedented, brothers and sisters. It's gonna be bad news after bad news. What's it called? You're not sure of something, no surety, no nothing that things are gonna get better. It's just bad news constantly, like a domino effect. See the people walk around drunk, but they haven't had anything to drink. They said that the children be gray-headed. Why? Because no food, and their parents are trying to eat them. You see? They said that the most tender-hearted man won't have compassion for his wife and his children, so that the woman would give birth in silence, just to eat the afterbirth, the child in the afterbirth. That's where we headed. Headed to a time where people are going to be eating. Only thing you got to eat is piss and shit. They said you'll be so healthy that you'll heal. You'll be so healthy you heal. No matter what you do, it's like ripping your skin off and your skin heal back. You'll be so healthy you stays right. You'll be so healthy you can't even die. They say that you were looking for death, but death will never come. You see? It says at this time it'd be like a man who runs from a lion only to meet a bear. Escaping from the bear, he lays his hand against a wall in the house. He's bitten by a snake. Since his day is going to be dark and hopeless, by the ray of joy or hope. You see, brothers and sisters? That's why we got to invest in ourselves. We got to go through this tribulation. We got to get prepared to get the hell out of here. We got to get rid of the devil's mind, upload our mind. You can't go home like that. So you got to be 100% thorough knowledge of self. You got to be energy management. Work on your energy management. You got to work on that. Managing your energy. Work on your discipline. Get your discipline together. If our mathematical principle is allowed, invest in yourself. You'll be successful. You invest in yourself. You're getting the hell out of here. So you can't leave until you're 100%. So if you're 80, you need 20. If you're 70, you need 30. If you're 60, you need 40, so on and so forth. The tribulations is a makeup test, brothers and sisters, to get you prepared for Godhood. You can't return home until you're 100%. So you don't want anything to do with this. You want to invest in yourself. Invest in getting out of here. Excuse me, brothers and sisters. And we're not staying here. That's the thing our people don't know, but they will find out in a minute. You got a second option. Your second option is getting the hell out of here. Right here. In that day, God made it. It's the covenant. It's the Abraham covenant. In that day, God made a covenant with Abram, saying, "Unto thy seed have I given this land from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates." River of Egypt, the river Euphrates. Look on those coordinates. Look at the map. Look at those coordinates. In between it is Great Arabia. We're getting out of here, brothers and sisters. That's the promise. We're not taking any 6 states, 6 states. We're not taking any reparations, 40 acres of the mule. We're not taking anything, any plea deals. They said what God has for you is better. We're getting out of here, brothers and sisters. Didn't do it. You have to have your discipline. You have to have your mind. We have to work together. We have to apply these pillars. You see? We have to do all these things to get the hell out of here. We're going to work together. No friction, no conflict, no confusion. All on the same page. The spirit of the unsealed scriptures, having the spirit of the unsealed scriptures of the time, which is Revelations unsealed. Getting your mind back. You see? Getting prepared for all these things. To return home and enter the kingdom of heaven. You see? Enter the kingdom. A paradise shall last forever. And you can't go there with a corrupted mind. You're going to corrupt your paradise. You bring hell with you. So you make paradise, not hell. So you can't go that way. So, brothers and sisters, that's what we got to do. We're going to work together. We're going to give you the information needed to be successful. We're going to make sure you don't perish. Because this is what you need to not perish. People got a vision, will perish. So here's your vision. We're getting out of here. We want to save as many of our people as we can, brothers and sisters, so pass the message on. Let the brothers and sisters know about what's taking place. Right, brothers and sisters? Like I said, you don't want to be here. There's going to be no food. Not to mention, you're still 3/5 of a human, a person. Which means that you're not human by their law. So you do the math on that, brothers and sisters. What happens when they have no food? They classify you as an animal. What do you think happens? That's how that affects you. There's no hope here in America for you, brothers and sisters. Complete separation. Because you'll be a fool to stay here and land in your imprisonment. For investing in yourself, brothers and sisters. Let's take a look at what's going on.
5,329. Let that number sit for a moment. 5,329 Iranian Shahed 238 jet-powered kamikaze drones launched in a single coordinated wave from coastal batteries, fast attack vessels, ground mobile launchers, and modified cargo aircraft operating over the Gulf of Oman, all directed at one target, Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the largest drone swarm ever assembled in the history of aerial warfare. A number so large that the Patriot batteries defending the base, the Phalanx close-in weapon systems on the perimeter, the F-35 combat air patrol aloft at the time of the wave's detection, the carrier-based air defenses of 2 strike groups in the Arabian Sea providing outer layer intercept support, and every other element of the most sophisticated integrated air defense network the United States military operates, combined together, simultaneously, could not engage more than 14% of them before the first ones hit the runway. 9 minutes. That is the total time between the moment the leading edge of the 5,000 drone wave crossed the outer detection threshold of Al Udeid's radar network and the moment the base's runway system was declared permanently non-operational by the Air Force engineering team that assessed the damage in the 48 hours that followed. Not temporarily closed pending repairs, permanently non-operational, a runway system that had handled more than 300 combat sorties per day for the duration of this conflict, the runway system through which every American air mission in the Middle East had been either launched, recovered, or logistically supported, declared permanently non-operational. It will not be repaired at its current location. The engineering team's assessment said what engineering teams say when the damage exceeds the threshold of what repair can restore to specification. It cannot be brought back to operational standard. The location is the problem. The runway is gone, and the ground it rested on cannot be the ground a runway rests on again. The reason the ground cannot support a runway again is what makes this strike different from every previous operation in this series. It is not what the drones did to the runway surface. It is what 5,329 drones carrying a specific payload. Not all of them explosive, not all of them kamikaze, some of them carrying something that nobody was talking about in the first 48 hours of coverage, did to the foundation of the runway system, to the drainage infrastructure beneath it, to the sub-base geological stability that a runway requires over the operational lifetime that the Air Force plans around. I will explain that payload in detail. But first, I need you to understand the scale of what 5,000 drones looks like in the air, because the number alone does not convey it. Stay with me for the next 22 minutes. The number is the headline. The engineering is the story. Before we talk about the 9 minutes and the runway assessment, I want to help you understand what 5,329 drones actually looks like in the air, because the number is abstract in a way that hides the physical reality of what the base's radar operators, the fighter pilots airborne at intercept, and the ground crews sheltering across the flight line saw when the wave arrived. 5,000 drones is not a large formation.
Wondering which pan is truly non-toxic? Listen to what this toxin expert reveals.
What are the best toxin?
It is a weather event. A single Shahed 238 has a wingspan of approximately 2.5 meters. 5,329 of them, flying in a formation dense enough to present a continuous radar return rather than individual contacts, occupies an airspace volume of approximately 140 kilometers in width and 60 kilometers in depth at the formation density Iran used, an airspace volume 140 kilometers wide. That is wider than the entire state of Qatar from its western border to its eastern coast. The wave was wider than the country it was flying over. Every radar system in Qatar, military, civilian, commercial aviation, was simultaneously looking at the leading edge of a drone formation that was wider than the country those radars were designed to protect. The Phalanx close-in weapon systems that ring Al Udeid's perimeter can engage contacts at a maximum rate of approximately 4,500 rounds per minute, with a practical burst duration of 2 to 3 seconds before the thermal management system requires a cooling interval. Against a drone formation at close range, a phalanx in continuous engagement mode can destroy contacts at a rate of approximately 1 every 2 to 3 seconds at its peak effectiveness. Against 5,329 drones arriving over a 9-minute window, every phalanx system on the base perimeter would need to have been firing continuously from the moment the first drone appeared on the horizon to have made a material difference to the number that reached the runway. There are 11 phalanx systems at Al Udeid. 11 phalanx systems firing continuously for 9 minutes against 5,000 drones is a ratio that the mathematics of air defense does not resolve in the defender's favor. The F-35 Combat Air Patrol, 4 aircraft airborne at the time of detection, began engaging outer perimeter contacts as soon as the wave was identified and classified. Each F-35 carries a combat load of AIM-120D AMRAAM missiles for this kind of engagement, with a magazine capacity of 4 to 8 rounds depending on loadout configuration. 4 aircraft, at maximum loadout, carry between 16 and 32 missiles. 16 to 32 missiles against 5,329 contacts. The F-35 pilots did not run out of targets. They ran out of missiles in the first 90 seconds and transitioned to gun strafing runs, which is the most effective close-range engagement mode against drone swarms and the one with the highest per-sortie attrition rate, and which still did not change what happened to the runway in the 9 minutes that followed. The pilots performed with extraordinary professionalism against a problem whose mathematics were not going to be solved by professionalism alone. The number that matters for understanding the runway outcome is not 5,329, it is 4,183. The number of drones that the Air Force engineering team estimated reached the runway system based on the impact pattern analysis conducted in the 48 hours after the wave. 4,583 drone impacts across a runway system comprising 3 runways, 12 taxiways, and the apron areas connecting them. That is what permanently non-operational looks like from the engineering team's perspective, not the impact craters in the asphalt. What those 4,583 drones were carrying and what that payload did to the ground beneath the asphalt is the story of the 9 minutes. Not all 5,329 drones were kamikaze weapons in the traditional sense, a drone carrying an explosive warhead that detonates on impact and creates a crater. If all of them had carried standard high explosive warheads, the runway would have been severely damaged and temporarily closed. High explosive craters in runway asphalt are repairable. The Air Force has runway repair teams trained and equipped to fill craters and restore a degraded runway to operational status within hours for a temporary repair and within days for a permanent one. High explosive craters are a known problem with a known solution. Iran did not send 5,000 drones to create a problem with a known solution. Of the 5,329 drones, approximately 3,800 were carrying a thermite-based incendiary payload, rather than a high explosive warhead. Thermite is a mixture of aluminum powder and iron oxide that, when ignited, burns at approximately 2,500 degrees Celsius. Hot enough to melt through steel, hot enough to burn through asphalt, and hot enough to penetrate into the sub-base material beneath the asphalt and alter its physical properties in ways that are not repairable by conventional runway repair methods. A thermite payload does not crater a runway. It burns into it. It penetrates through the asphalt surface layer, through the aggregate base course beneath, and into the subgrade, the compacted soil and engineered fill material that provides the load-bearing foundation the runway rests on. At 2,500 degrees Celsius, the subgrade material in the specific area of the thermite burn is not just scorched. Its structural properties are permanently altered. The load-bearing capacity of the burned zone is reduced to a fraction of its original specification. A runway surface rebuilt over burned subgrade does not have the load-bearing capacity required for military aircraft operations. The F-35 weighs approximately 31,000 pounds empty. The B-2 weighs approximately 158,000 pounds empty. A runway whose subgrade has been thermite treated across a significant percentage of its area cannot safely bear those loads. 3,800 thermite drones impacting across 3 runways and 12 taxiways at Al Udeid, with impact patterns designed to achieve subgrade treatment across the maximum possible percentage of the runway system's area, produced a subgrade damage pattern that the engineering team's ground-penetrating radar survey characterized as affecting between 68 and 74% of the runway system's total load-bearing foundation area. 68 to 74% of the foundation permanently altered. A runway system operates safely when its foundation meets specification across its entire area, because the weakest zone of a runway is the zone that fails first under repeated aircraft loading.
This professional 32 TW SSD, capable of holding the entire collection of the New York Public Library.
You cannot operate a runway at 68 to 74% foundation integrity. You cannot patch around it. The entire subbase would need to be excavated, removed, and replaced with new engineered fill material compacted to specification. That operation, at Al Udeid's scale, takes between 18 months and 3 years under ideal construction conditions. In Qatar's summer heat, with the supply chain constraints affecting the theater's logistics, the engineering team's assessment was on the longer end of that range. The remaining 1,529 drones carried standard high explosive warheads. Their targets were not the runway surface. They were the aircraft parking apron, the fuel farm, the maintenance hangars, the perimeter lighting system, the arresting gear installations, and the runway lighting and navigation aid infrastructure. The high explosive component of the strike destroyed the infrastructure that makes a runway operational rather than merely a paved surface. An intact runway without functioning fuel systems, arresting gear, lighting, and navigation aids is not an operational airfield. It is a very long parking lot. The thermite component ensured the runway surface itself could not be restored. The high explosive component ensured that even if the surface were somehow restored, the infrastructure that makes it useful would need to be rebuilt from scratch. Together, they produce permanent non-operational status in 9 minutes. Let me walk you through the 9 minutes in sequence, because the wave architecture Iran used was not simply a large number of drones launched in one direction. It was 4 distinct waves timed to defeat 4 specific defensive systems in a sequence that left each successive wave facing progressively degraded opposition. Wave 1 arrived at 6:14:22. 1,200 Shahed 238 drones on a primary approach axis from the northwest, flying at 400 meters altitude and 350 kilometers per hour. Their role was to trigger every air defense system Al Udeid operated: Patriot batteries, Phalanx systems, rolling airframe missile launchers, the airborne F-35 CAP, into full engagement mode simultaneously, consuming interceptor magazines, overheating close-in weapon systems, and forcing the battle management picture maintained by the E-2D Hawkeye to allocate its tracking and guidance resources to the primary axis. 1,200 contacts on the primary axis is a number that fully saturates every engagement system the base operates and leaves nothing in reserve. The first wave was not designed to hit the runway. It was designed to empty the magazine. Wave 2 arrived at 6:16:08, 1 minute and 46 seconds after the first wave's leading edge crossed the detection threshold. 2,114 thermite payload drones on 3 simultaneous approach axes: northwest, southeast, and south, arriving as the Patriot batteries were completing engagement sequences against the first wave, and the Phalanx systems were entering their thermal management cooling intervals. The combined intercept capacity of the base's defense architecture at this moment was a fraction of what it had been 90 seconds earlier. The Phalanx guns were cycling. The Patriot batteries had expended the majority of their remaining interceptor inventory against the first wave's high-density contact environment. The rolling airframe missiles had been exhausted in the first wave entirely. 2,114 thermite drones on 3 approach axes, against a defense that had just fought its peak engagement and was still processing the aftermath is not a balanced contest. It is arithmetic. Most of the thermite wave reached the runway. Wave 3 arrived at 6:19:44, 5 minutes and 22 seconds after the first wave. 1,486 thermite payload drones on 2 approach axes perpendicular to the second wave's axis, targeting the taxiway system and the apron areas that the second wave's runway-centered targeting had left partially covered. The base's air defense at this point was operating on whatever ammunition remained after 2-wave engagements, with phalanx systems that had been cycling between engagement and thermal management throughout the previous 5 minutes, and with the F-35 cap having transitioned to gun strafing runs that had reduced their own fuel and ordnance to minimum combat margins. The third wave completed the thermite treatment of the taxiway and apron foundation areas that the second wave had not fully covered. By 6:21:30, 7 minutes and 8 seconds after the first contact, the thermite treatment of the runway system's subgrade was substantially complete. Wave 4 arrived at 6:22:47, 8 minutes and 25 seconds after the first wave. 529 high explosive drones targeting the fuel farm, maintenance hangars, perimeter infrastructure, and runway lighting system. With the base's active defense architecture at minimum residual capacity, after 3 waves of continuous engagement, the fourth wave reached its targets with minimal interception. The fuel farm detonated at 6:23:04, a secondary explosion that the base's damage control teams would later assess as the single most destructive event of the 9-minute strike in terms of immediate structural damage to the base's operational infrastructure. At 6:23:22, 9 minutes after the first drone crossed the detection threshold, the last fourth wave impact completed. Al Udeid's runway system had received 4,583 thermite and high explosive impacts. Its subgrade was permanently altered across 68 to 74% of its load-bearing area. Its fuel system was destroyed. Its maintenance infrastructure was burning. Its perimeter lighting and navigation aids were gone. The runways that had launched and recovered 300 combat sorties per day for 19 months of conflict would not launch or recover another aircraft, ever, at that location. Right here, I want to pause and hear from you. Drop a comment right now telling me where you are watching from, your country, your city. The series has built a community across the entire world, and I want to know who is in this conversation. And tell me this specifically. Did you know that thermite-based runway denial munitions existed as a military concept before this video? Did you know about the subgrade foundation vulnerability that makes thermite more effective against runways than high explosive craters? Because I'm genuinely curious how much of the engineering in this strike was already familiar to people watching this channel. Tell me in the comments right now, and let us keep going, because what happened to American air power in this theater after the runway closed is the part of the story that matters most for where this conflict goes next. Permanently non-operational is a phrase that sounds final but requires unpacking, because what it means in practice for American air operations in the Middle East is something more complex and more operationally significant than simply no more flights from Al Udeid.
The government is banning this $29 wearable AC device next month, and this is your last shot to get the original full-power version. There's a new wearable AC device out there.
Let me explain what permanently non-operational actually means for the air campaign, for the logistics network, for the command architecture, and for the timeline of this conflict. The immediate air power consequence is the loss of Al Udeid's sortie generation capacity for the duration of the conflict and well beyond it. Al Udeid was generating between 280 and 320 combat sorties per day at its peak operational tempo during this conflict. More daily sortie generation than any other single airfield in the theater, including the carrier flight decks combined. Those sorties do not disappear when the runway closes. They need somewhere else to go. The alternate airfields available to absorb Al Udeid's sortie load are Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, Al Dhafra in the UAE, and the carrier decks in the Arabian Sea. Prince Sultan can absorb approximately 80 sorties per day of additional capacity beyond its current operational load before its support infrastructure reaches saturation. Al Dhafra can absorb approximately 60. The carrier decks can surge to a combined additional 120 sorties per day under maximum sustainable tempo. That is 260 sorties per day of absorptive capacity against 280 to 320 that need to be accommodated. The math produces a permanent reduction of between 15 and 20% in the theater's daily combat sortie generation. For a campaign that has already been operating at reduced capacity from the alternate CENTCOM headquarters, a further 15 to 20% reduction in sortie generation is not a minor efficiency loss. It is a material degradation in the ability to sustain the operations the campaign requires. The logistics consequence is larger than the sortie consequence. Al Udeid was not just an airfield. It was the primary logistics hub for American military operations across the entire theater, the facility through which spare parts, medical supplies, ammunition, personnel rotations, and the hundreds of categories of material that sustain a military campaign flow to forward positions. Logistics aircraft that land at Al Udeid with supplies for forward bases cannot land there anymore. They need alternate landing points, alternate distribution networks, alternate ground transportation routes from those alternate landing points to the positions that Al Udeid was supplying directly. Building alternate logistics, routing from scratch, in a theater where the communications and command architecture is already degraded and the forward base infrastructure has been under sustained attack for 19 months takes time. The supplies still move. They move more slowly through longer routes, with more handling and more risk of disruption at each additional handling point. Logistics degradation compounds operational degradation in ways that do not show up in sortie counts, but accumulate in the readiness rates of the equipment that the logistics chain is supposed to keep operational. The timeline consequence is the most strategically significant and the most difficult to reverse. The engineering team's assessment of the runway restoration timeline, 18 months to 3 years for full restoration, assuming ideal construction conditions and uninterrupted supply chain access, means that Al Udeid is not a strategic asset that recovers on any timeline relevant to the current conflict. If this conflict reaches a negotiated resolution in the next 6 months, Al Udeid's runway will still be non-operational at the time of the resolution. If the conflict continues for another 18 months, Al Udeid's runway will still be non-operational at the end of it. The closure is not a temporary disruption that the conflict's outcome will resolve. It is a structural feature of the post-conflict environment in the Middle East, regardless of how the conflict ends. The most important American airfield in the region will be a construction site for between 18 months and 3 years starting from today. Every military and diplomatic decision made in that period will be made in a strategic environment where the United States does not have Al Udeid as a functioning airfield. Let us talk about the economics of 5,329 drones, because the cost exchange ratio of this strike is the most extreme in the entire series, and it tells you something fundamental about why Iran chose this specific method at this specific moment. A Shahed 238 costs Iran between $75,000 and $120,000 to produce and deploy, depending on the payload variant. At the midpoint of that range, call it $97,500 per drone. 5,329 drones at $97,500 each represents a total offensive cost of approximately $519 million. That is the cost Iran paid to permanently close Al Udeid's runway system, $519 million. The cost to the United States of the strike has 5 components. The first is the immediate defensive expenditure: interceptors, gun ammunition, missile system maintenance, and aircraft operations, costs across 9 minutes of maximum intensity air defense engagement, estimated at between $800 million and $1.2 billion based on the interceptor types and quantities expended. The second is the direct infrastructure loss: Al Udeid's runway system, fuel farm, maintenance hangars, and perimeter infrastructure. The replacement cost of the physical infrastructure destroyed or requiring replacement is estimated at between $2.4 and $3.1 billion. The third is the operational cost of the reduced sortie generation over the restoration timeline, the cost of reduced campaign effectiveness, increased logistics routing, reduced readiness, and the operational friction of the 18-month to 3-year restoration period. This is the hardest component to quantify, but defense economists, estimating the operational cost of a comparable sortie generation reduction over an 18-month period, produce figures in the range of $4 to $7 billion in reduced campaign effectiveness. The fourth component is the restoration cost itself, the engineering, materials, and construction for the runway, subgrade replacement, and reconstruction, estimated at between $1.8 and $2.6 billion. The fifth is the strategic cost, the value of the deterrence, the alliance reassurance, the political signaling, and the operational flexibility that Al Udeid's active status provided, which is not a figure that can be expressed in dollars, but which every government in the region is implicitly calculating in the diplomatic decisions they are making in the weeks following the strike. The 4 quantifiable components total between $9 and $13.9 billion, against an offensive cost of $519 million.
You don't need to spend $300 on a plumber anymore. This little tool can fix it perfectly. Just heat up the tip with a lighter, apply it evenly to the crack or gap, and once it hardens, smooth it out. It fits perfectly, seals tight with no leaks, and leaves no visible repair marks. It works on copper, iron, aluminum, stainless steel.
The cost exchange ratio is between 17 to 1 and 27 to 1 in Iran's favor. $17 to $27 of damage and cost imposed on the United States for every dollar Iran spent on the strike. This is not the most lethal strike in the series. It produced no American fatalities. It produced no structural collapse. It produced no communications blackout. What it produced was the most economically efficient permanent denial of a major American military asset in the history of this conflict, at a cost ratio that makes every previous operation's economics look expensive by comparison. The 5,000 drone thermite strike on Al Udeid's runways was not invented for this operation. It was built over 19 months of operations that each contributed one specific piece of the design. Understanding which previous operation contributed which piece of the Al Udeid drone strikes architecture is understanding how a military campaign learns and applies its learning in progressively more sophisticated ways. The magazine depletion sequencing, the 4-wave architecture timed to defeat each defensive layer before the next wave arrived, was the direct application of the lesson from the first major drone wave we covered in this series' 12th video, when 500 drones at 2 carriers demonstrated the relationship between wave architecture and interceptor exhaustion. The specific timing intervals between waves at Al Udeid, 1 minute 46 seconds between wave 1 and wave 2, long enough for the Patriot batteries to complete their first wave engagements and commit to engagement sequences that prevented immediate retargeting to the incoming second wave, were calibrated from the engagement timing data that Iran's post-operation analysis of the carrier drone engagement produced. The lesson from 500 drones was applied at a scale 19 times larger. The thermite payload itself was a development that the Al Udeid runway engineering vulnerability pointed toward long before this strike. The runway vulnerability, the dependence of military runways on subgrade integrity that thermite can compromise in ways that high explosive cannot, is documented in open source military engineering literature going back to the 1970s. What Iran's development program produced was a thermite payload small enough to be carried by a drone-class platform, reliable enough to function at the impact dynamics of a Shahed 238 striking at 350 kilometers per hour, and designed to penetrate through asphalt and aggregate base course before initiating, which requires a delayed ignition system that activates after the drone has punched through the surface layers rather than detonating on the asphalt itself. The development of a drone-deployable thermite penetrator that initiates at subbase depth is a specific engineering achievement that did not exist in the Iranian inventory at the beginning of this conflict. It was developed during it. The specific intelligence about Al Udeid's runway construction specifications, the asphalt layer depth, the aggregate base course thickness, the subgrade material composition that informed the thermite penetrator's design came from the RQ-180 engineering documentation, recovered from the drone we covered in this series' 10th operation. The sensor bay documentation gave Iran the construction survey data for multiple American military airfields it had overflown. Al Udeid was on the list. 19 operations, 19 months. The series has now documented the systematic permanent denial of 2 of the 3 most important American military assets in the Middle East: the CENTCOM forward headquarters at Al Udeid, which will not be rebuilt at its original location, and now the Al Udeid runway system, which will not be restored for between 18 months and 3 years. The third major asset, the carrier strike groups, have been rendered combat ineffective multiple times and are in various stages of repair and reconstitution. The American military is operating in the Middle East from a degraded, distributed, reduced capacity architecture that bears only a passing resemblance to the force structure it entered this conflict with 19 months ago. The economics of the runway strike, $119 million of offensive cost against $9 to $13.9 billion of damage, denial, and operational cost, produce a cost exchange ratio that makes the conflict economically unsustainable for the United States. At the current operational tempo, without producing a comparable rate of strategic progress toward whatever the American strategic objective in this conflict is. That objective, the precise formulation of what the United States is trying to achieve, and what it would accept as sufficient achievement, is something that has never been publicly articulated with the precision that would allow the cost rate to be assessed against a defined end state. The absence of that articulation is not an accident of communication. It is a reflection of the genuine difficulty of defining what success looks like in a conflict that has evolved across 19 months in ways that the original strategic framework did not anticipate. The ceasefire proposal has been on the Omani Channel's table since the first Al Udeid strike. It remains there. It now sits in a context that includes a permanently closed CENTCOM headquarters location, a permanently non-operational runway system at Al Udeid, 3 aircraft carriers in various stages of repair, 47 Americans killed at Naples, 3 pilots killed resuming carrier operations after a 6-day grounding, 61 Americans killed in the Naples strike, 73 killed in the 444 missile CENTCOM strike, 61 in the 333 missile strike, and the accumulated casualties of 19 months of conflict whose full count appears in the notifications delivered to families whose addresses the Department of Defense has on file. The proposal offers a path to stopping. The path requires accepting terms that 18 months ago would have been rejected immediately. The terms have not changed. The context has. And the context is everything. Nobody died in the Al Udeid drone strike. Nobody. 5,329 drones, 9 minutes, 4,583 impacts, permanent runway denial across the most important American airfield in the Middle East, and 0 American fatalities. The base's sheltering protocols, the hardened personnel facilities, and the 11 minutes of warning time between the first radar detection and the first impact allowed every person on the base to reach shelter before the drones arrived. Nobody died. That fact, that the most economically devastating single strike in this series killed no one, is worth sitting with for a moment, because it tells you something important about the nature of what this conflict has become. The early operations killed people and damaged equipment. The middle operations killed people and destroyed buildings. The later operations killed people and closed headquarters permanently. This one closed a runway permanently and killed nobody. Iran designed a strike whose objective was infrastructure denial rather than personnel elimination at an economic efficiency that makes every previous operation look expensive, using a payload innovation developed specifically from intelligence data collected in a previous operation. The evolution from killing people to denying infrastructure at minimum cost and maximum economic impact is the evolution of a campaign that has learned, over 19 months, that the most consequential damage is not necessarily the deadliest. The runway at Al Udeid will be a construction site for the next 18 months to 3 years. The aircraft that used to launch from it are launching from elsewhere, more slowly, with more friction, at reduced tempo. The conflict continues. The mission does not stop. It continues from the alternate locations, at the reduced sortie rate, through the longer logistics routes, with the degraded command architecture on the terms that 19 months of systematic assumption retirement have imposed. Share this video if it has given you a framework for understanding how those terms were imposed, one operation at a time, across 19 months. Share it with someone who is following this conflict and needs the complete picture. Hit share right now and leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me whether you think the thermite drone swarm, no fatalities, maximum infrastructure denial, minimum cost, represents the most sophisticated operation in this series, or whether one of the earlier ones earns that title. Tell me what the 20th operation looks like. Tell me whether the ceasefire proposal gets accepted before or after that 20th operation happens. This community has been thinking seriously about this conflict for 19 videos, and I want your read on where the 19th leaves things. Leave it in the comments. Stay with this story.